Now, some breaking news has come out in the last couple of hours where Alexander Isak has finally spoken about his situation at Newcastle, and now it looks like, to be honest, he's probably going to move to Liverpool where that deal will go through. Now, looking at some of the comments that he said, Alexander Isak said he's proud to be recognised as part of the Premier League team of the season by the PFA, which was announced tonight, and he wants to thank everyone at Newcastle and he has no lost love for that team. However, he is not at the ceremony because he doesn't feel like it is right, and he has kept quiet for a while, allowing other people to talk, and says that the club's promises to him were broken over time, and it is also been misleading the time and that everything has happened, maybe alluding to the fact that he has announced he wanted to leave for a very long time before this has even come to a light. Now, this is one of them weird situations where over the last couple of weeks you've seen people online and people talk about how Alexander Isak is in the wrong for this situation. Now, I've always stayed away from saying that because we just simply don't know two sides of the argument, and you've always got to see both sides to kind of find the truth, which is usually somewhere in the middle. Now, I do think this doesn't necessarily mean that Alexander Isak is completely right in his thinking, but just alluding to the fact that the club have promised things and they haven't necessarily got their end of the bargain up makes it kind of look like Alexander Isak had told them he wanted to leave months prior to this season even ended, and they just didn't allow him to, which I do think can be a way that he would want to leave, and it is fair too. Now, we could talk about Newcastle fans being angry, and I think Newcastle fans are allowed to be angry with this situation. They've given a lot to Isak and they at least want him to play while that transfer isn't done. I think that is fair enough. But in terms of Newcastle as a club, I've always been hesitant to be in favour of them because of this situation as a whole. As Newcastle, you've got to kind of understand your order in the pecking. You've kind of got to understand where you are in the pecking order. They've spent a lot of money on these great players over time and have developed them, but they're still not at the highest peak level of football, competing for Premier League titles every year. You know, they scraped Champions League football, coming fifth on goal difference just last season. And when you look at all these factors and you think about the things involved, Alexander Isak is undoubtedly one of the best strikers, at least the most complete striker in the world right now, and wants to be competing at that level. And Newcastle just aren't going to be consistently in them late knockout rounds of the Champions League or going to be competing for the Premier League anytime soon. It will probably take at least 3 or 4 years with a lot more signings to get to that level. Now, that doesn't mean Alexander Isak couldn't make a good career at Newcastle, but you've got to want more. These players only have a fine career at the top level, and when they're getting held against their will, which we've seen too much this summer, you know, we've seen it with Woklz to Arsenal, that was a big example of that, where the club go, yes, we will get you gone for around 50 to 60 mil, and then when the money actually hits their email, they decide to change their mind, wanting more, being greedy, and then vilify the player in front of the fans. Now, I don't agree with that personally. I think Isak has done a lot for this club, and people need to realise that he is an asset at the end of the day to them. They can't afford to just keep him on their bench because of the value that he holds, the player that he is, and that is just not very well seen. And there's also been reports about potentially him being able to terminate his contract if he doesn't get sold at the end of this window. Now, you could talk about the legitimacy of all that and if that is right, and I think that's a fair enough conversation to have. But if Isak wants to leave and he made that quite clear to the team he wanted to leave, then I do think Newcastle should always be open to the fact anyone can leave. As someone that supports a different team, even with our team, we have the same problem. Even if your players want to leave and you want to keep them, there has to be a sort of conversation there where there's a value in the clauses where you can agree a deal. I think it is dangerous to go into a summer and say this player is not for sale because it kind of just alienates the player at all, especially if the team is going to have a poor season or it's just not at that level. I do think you should go into the summer being like, if we get a good amount of money, 140, 150 mil, which is not small, you can rebuild an entire squad with that at this rate. That would have been a much better level, but they clearly didn't. They put their foot down, thinking that they can basically just outmoney anyone, which is not the case. He will want to go to Liverpool and he's forcing this move, it looks like, and I kind of do respect that. Now, I do think what this means is that the deal will probably go through for Alexander Isak to Liverpool, but I don't think Newcastle should just be giving him off. I do think they should make it hard and still have a good value in mind to get rid of the player. Now, I do personally think the 110 mil bid that Liverpool supposedly did is a little bit of an outrage. I do think he is worth around 140 to 150 million pounds, and I think Newcastle should ask for that as well, despite the fact he wants to leave, because we know Liverpool have gone all out for him. We know Liverpool will probably spend that extra 20 mil to get him, because if not, they won't be able to get him at all. And unless some weird situation happens where he kind of threatens to leave on a free and that ends up happening and you can force Newcastle into paying less, I do think Liverpool will happily pay 140 mil if it comes to it. They've saved money for this. They've sold a lot of players as well to make more cash. And I think this is going to be a big part of something that needs to be looked at for the team. So it is definitely something that Newcastle will have to be aware of if he is going to run down his contract. Now, I do get the perspective of he signed a deal, so he should honour that deal. But football is not necessarily an easy game to see in that way. Clubs will hold players against their will no matter what they want and then throw you away as soon as they don't want you or you're not good enough to play. And for the players, if you sign this deal, there's never a guarantee you're going to be at that club that long, because usually the players are just not wanted at the team. So I do think the players should have a little bit of leeway in being able to make their own sales as well and their own leaves of the club, as well as obviously playing for the club as well. I do think that the club should have a little bit of warrant to keep the players sometimes as well. I think it should work both ways. It shouldn't just all be leaned to the club so they get complete authority of you. And what people I think need to realise is that these players are professional players at the end of the day and they want to play at the highest level. I think that it's quite arrogant and rude of people just to expect them to stay at your club because you have that love for the club. Does Isak realistically have that love for Newcastle like a dedicated fan from Newcastle from birth? No. He's going to support them, he's going to like his team, but his ideation of that club is going to be the players within the club, the board, the team, the management team, and anything around the stadium that he sees. He won't be seeing all this stuff on social media all the time, and he won't be out there on the Newcastle streets seeing that love. It's honestly like he lives in a different world to it some of the times. I also think as a professional, you don't look at your career and go, I want to miss out on things for money or other areas. He's been adamant he doesn't want to go to Saudi for money, which in any other club and any other player is a good thing, but Newcastle obviously don't want that because they don't even care about the money, it seems, over this time. He's been adamant he wants to go for professional and footballing reasons, and I think Newcastle should understand that, where you are at the level in your table and how many years it might take to get from 5th to 1st, because some people think it's a short notion, but Arsenal have been 2nd 3 years in a row, and I'll tell you, it's harder to get from 2nd to 1st than it is from 15th to 4th. It is just so much harder to actually get over that line to win consistently. And given his age and given the amount of time he's got left, he hasn't got the amount of time that some of these other players have. And I think with Newcastle signings this year, you can talk about the fact that not many players even want to go to their club. It's clearly a place where it's hard to get players to come into, so it's clearly not the best place to go in general. I know that you can talk about different reasons for this, and I think there's some that Newcastle can't control, but ultimately I do think there's a certain level of footballing reasons where you should respect him leaving the club, and I just kind of understand it in that perspective. Now, in terms of Liverpool, tomorrow we're going to make a video about how he fits in with the team and how he can kind of make that system work a little bit more, but ultimately I do think there's a certain level of Alexander Isak will be a Liverpool player, as much as that may not be the best idea considering their defence, but it looks like they might get Mark Guay as well. I still think he can work really well, and I think him and Ekitike together actually will work better than one being on the bench. Now, it is a sad time for Newcastle, but I do think they can still get players for the money if they can get it very well. 140 mil is not to be sniffed at. You can easily buy at least 2 to 3 or maybe even 4 attackers with that, which will equally probably get him out the goals that he will, and considering his injury record at Newcastle, will probably even be more of an upgrade. I think Newcastle really should get rid of their best player in order to fund the rest of their team. It's a part of football and teams need to learn to do this. Liverpool did it with Coutinho, Tottenham did it with Harry Kane. I know you could argue Tottenham have got that much better, but they have got better players as a squad overall. And sometimes in life you have to understand that you have to sell your best asset when the time is right in order to get better, and that is something that Newcastle need to realise as a club. And in order to get to that highest level, sometimes some of these players are just not going to be there, and you've got to keep reinventing and finding other players to join the club. Overall in the comments, let me know what you guys think, and let me know what you kind of think about this news YRV video. Thank you guys, and I'll see you in the next one.